There were times in my own life when I felt aimless. No destination, no stops along the way, just a clock slowly ticking down until the day ended and a new one began, with nothing meaningful happening in between. Now, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it's fair to say that most people hate feeling this way. The slow ache of monotonous tasks, the dreaded in between seasons of life. But what if these things were real, materially real? What if these mere emotional limbos transcended their limitations and manifested in physical areas? What you would get is something called a liminal space. A place that feels strangely familiar, yet completely empty, as if reality and time itself are holding their breath. Essentially, these places exist in the in-between of our memories, too mundane to be remembered, but impossible to fully forget. The term liminality was initially used in anthropology, coined by Arnold van Gennep in 1909, who described it as an ambiguity or disorientation that happens in the middle of a rite of passage. The term was later expanded upon by Victor Turner in the 1960s, evolving the term to become more of what we recognize today. Turner believed that the concept of liminality wasn't just to show the significance of these in-between periods, but also to comprehend the human responses to these liminal experiences. Liminality is inherently unclear. It seems like one's sense of identity sort of dissolves to a certain degree, which brings both disorientation and the possibility of new perspectives. In essence, liminality is the middle stage of change, after something has already happened, but before any new reality or change can fully settle into your life or character. Psychologically, humans are inherently uneasy in these undefined states. Our brains crave resolution, and when a space itself defies the patterns that we expect, it can trigger some low levels of anxiety. These physical spaces can also reflect transitional life stages, like starting a new relationship, or starting a new job, or leaving home for the first time. Liminal spaces are powerful because they represent our incomplete transformations, changes within ourselves that aren't finished. It could be an experience that you never fully recovered from, or a responsibility you haven't yet faced. In daily life, these liminal spaces show this process in its physical form. Empty hallways, empty classrooms, parking lots at night, or airports at 4 a.m. or something. These areas all have a specific feeling to them that's hard to put into words. It's an interesting phenomenon, to say the least. It brings about an atmosphere of dread, particularly because of the sheer lack of human life present in any of these liminal spaces. Add a few humans into a photo of a liminal space, and suddenly it just loses its eeriness. Our brains are wired to seek patterns and expect familiar things. We are conditioned to see these spaces filled with people, and when people aren't there, it fills the air with a sense of dread and uncertainty. This triggers a mild feeling of cognitive dissonance. Liminal spaces feel familiar, yet are utterly void of any context. We can understand the location on an intellectual level, but we are entirely lost on the experiential level. It's not that these areas are inherently scary or anything, they just contradict the mental framework we use to navigate the world. People often report feeling nostalgic looking at such images or even being around a liminal space in real life, and this nostalgia can give room for more emotions. Liminal spaces usually remind us of our childhood or past experiences. They remind us of those moments we were alone or bored or just exploring the world as kids, still trying to make sense of things. That's why looking at them can trigger this bittersweet nostalgia, somberness, melancholy, longing, or simply basking in a time that's now long since passed. We see airports at night, dentist offices, school halls, and our brain says, I know this place, but something is just not right. This nostalgia gives these spaces a really bittersweet quality, emblematic of their ambiguous nature. They are undeniably frightening, but also, like, strangely alluring. Even, like, kind of slightly attractive in a weird sense. It's like, I really want to look away, but I just can't. Because of this nostalgia, we often project our own subconscious emotions onto these spaces. Feeling lonely? The mall suddenly just feels emptier. Feeling anxious? The hallway feels almost threatening or terrifying or something. That's why the same liminal space can evoke radically different emotions for different people. Comfort for some, yet fear for others. Some may describe a liminal space as uncanny, a concept proposed by Ernst Jentsch in 1906, and later developed by Sigmund Freud in 1919, explaining the feeling that something is both familiar and unfamiliar simultaneously. At their core, liminal spaces are familiar environments that have become stripped of their purpose, left in what we might call an uncanny valley of places. The psychology is eerily similar. Your mind recognizes it, yet senses something is deeply wrong, creating this feeling of liminal tension. It's like walking through a dream or a memory or something. A world that mirrors reality but just slightly off. In fact, dreams themselves share a lot of traits with liminal spaces. They feel familiar but just slightly off. Personally, I don't always remember my dreams, but whenever I do, I wake up with this, like, strange sense that I was somewhere familiar. Like, sometimes I'll have dreams in old houses or old schools, and obviously things look and feel incredibly familiar, yet it's just not exactly right, Imagine walking through your old school in a dream, but hallways appear where they shouldn't be. You see people that never actually went there, and everything is quiet in a way that's almost like too quiet. That's the same tension you feel in liminal spaces. Dreams act as a kind of psychological in-between, reflecting transitions in life, or emotions we haven't fully processed yet. Even if you haven't had a dream exactly like this, you've probably felt that strange mix of familiarity and unease at some point, and that's just the soul of liminality. Like I mentioned previously, because these spaces are ambiguous by nature, people typically project differing emotions onto them. This tactic is rightfully used in media, which features liminal spaces. The most popular one that I could think of was the Backrooms. It started off as a simple internet meme on 4chan in 2019. An anonymous user posted a bland yellow-tinted hallway with the caption, "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." After the first post, people began sharing it widely, adding stories and imagining what it would be like to roam these endless halls. Eventually, a collective mythos formed with different levels and increasing dangers the further you explored the backrooms. Something I always found interesting about how the backrooms relates to liminal spaces is that the backrooms are supposed to have, like, actual monsters in them, like physical monsters that can harm you and such. The main horror that comes from liminal spaces is that you're all alone in a place that just doesn't feel right. The backrooms still have an element of this, but it also includes actual monsters, something that's even subtly hinted at in the original post. Now, look, I obviously don't know why the original poster decided to include monsters, but if I had to guess, it might have something to do with how our brains process liminal spaces. As I mentioned before, we project our subconscious emotions onto liminal spaces. For some, these intense emotions might literally feel like monsters. These monsters could be representative of our deepest emotions manifesting in this niche internet subculture. Or maybe they just added monsters because monsters are scary or something. Again, I don't know. Personally, I always kind of thought it would be better if there were no monsters. I feel like monsters slightly cheapen the psychological horror the Backrooms offers. Just imagine for a moment falling through the floor and having to walk through an infinite number of these randomly segmented empty rooms. Despite this, it's still interesting how the Backrooms was able to combine monster horror and psychological horror. After the initial meme phase of the Backrooms, people started making videos, indie games, even short films based on it. On January 7th, 2022, Kane Pixels released a video about the Backrooms that would eventually become the Backrooms alternate reality game. He turned a niche internet subculture into a fully fledged, immersive narrative story. The Backrooms went from a single image of a liminal space to a text copypasta and niche subculture to inspiring short films and indie games, and finally becoming an alternate reality game and cultural phenomenon. And who knows, maybe even a movie in the next few years. Demonstrating how simple ideas like liminality can slowly evolve throughout the online space. The Backrooms are now essentially a shared piece of internet folklore, much like other creepypastas like Slenderman or Jeff the Killer. Despite creepypastas being pretty dead for the past few years, it's nice how the Backrooms were able to revive it for a while. The Backrooms are compelling for a multitude of different reasons. They have all the same compelling aspects of liminality, like ambiguity and the projection of emotion, just amplified, since it's practically an infinite maze of liminality. But the Backrooms in particular also have this shared identity. It was an internet cultural phenomenon. The idea doesn't belong to anyone, because everyone who participated had a small role to play in the creation of this Backrooms mythos. Psychologically and culturally, it's the perfect example of liminal spaces as an aesthetic and narrative story. Media involving liminal spaces, like the Backrooms, tend to produce introspection in people. There's a feeling in liminal spaces that you are between worlds, like not quite in the real world, but not too far away either. And the Backrooms plays into this angle beautifully. The idea that you no-clip out of reality or fall through the floor such that you are literally no longer in the comfortable, predictable reality you know so well is honestly pretty terrifying. I first learned about the Backrooms sometime in like 2020 or something. I remember exactly where I was. I was on a video call with a friend and we just stumbled across this new thing, the Backrooms. I wanted to find this one particular photo that I saw in like a video compilation a long time ago. I couldn't find it at the time, but it's the one photo of a Backrooms or liminal space that has always stuck out to me. This one. It just always reminded me of my childhood house. I don't even know why. It doesn't even really look like it. But it does have that same feeling. I can't describe it perfectly, but seeing this photo does give me a little bit of comfort and nostalgia for some reason. From the Backrooms to other forms of liminality, there's a real beauty in how drawn we are to liminal spaces. We love to chase patterns and stories. We love stepping into the unknown and seeing what it has to offer. We create meaning even in the most desperate of situations. So when entering a space that withholds any meaning, it becomes its own little psychological puzzle that never fully ends. The last piece will never truly fit right, partly due to the many conflicting emotions experienced within these spaces. The comfort of the familiarity it brings you mixed with the eeriness of the dread in the air. The feeling that something is just not quite right. It's genuinely addicting to our brains. Once this addiction manifests just right, it turns into a cultural internet aesthetic and mythos. Because despite the fact that we may never fully understand why or how or what we feel, we love sharing this feeling with others. The feeling of the threshold, the feeling of the in-between, the feeling of liminal spaces. Thanks for watching.